Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's call. My name is Graham Edwards. I'm Senior Transformation Lead at PwC. Today, we're going to be talking through the oneDPA projects through oneNDA use cases with a specific focus on simplifying contracting through standardization and automation. So we're joined today by a panel from Diageo, TLB, and ContractPodAi. First, we'll be hearing from Roisin, who's a COO at TLB and also co-founder at oneNDA and ClauseStack. We will also then be listening from Barry Proudfoot, who is at Diageo, who will be talking through the oneNDA journey and also their work on oneDPA so far. And then we'll be also talking to Jerry Levine, where we'll be talking through the ContractPodAi CLM enablement of that work that we've done on oneDPA. So Roisin, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Graham. I'm just going to request the control. So I'm going to start off today by talking about how this all started, so oneDPA and oneNDA. So let me just see if this is now working. There we go. So we all know that NDAs are broken. The same really applies to DPAs too. So the problem is everybody has their own NDA template. At the start of a relationship, you're always wrangling. Sorry, let me just go back. Okay, I can't go back, hang on. But let's try that again. So you're always wrangling with the counterparty at the start of your relationship. It's a really bad start to the relationship. It damages those relationships and just generally slows business down. They're very low risk, but extremely high volume. They add very little, next to zero ROI, and less than 1% of them get litigated. So this is a stat that came from some of our discussions and the data that was provided to us by the law firms involved in the project. So as Graham mentioned, I'm the COO of TLB. So TLB is a legal optimization consultancy. And one of the services that we provide for our clients is a managed service, so contract overflow support. And at the start of 2020, our CEO, Electra, and I did a deep dive into all of the contracts that we've been reviewing for people over the course of the year. And we found that 63% of those contracts were NDAs, which was just ridiculous. It's such a waste of everyone's money and time. So we decided to go out on LinkedIn, and Electra put out a post and said, hey guys, does anyone want to standardize the NDA? And it turns out that everybody wants to standardize the NDA. We had over 100 people sign up to the initiative within 24 hours. Within the next weeks and months that followed, we had hundreds more organizations sign up to the initiative to standardize this document, including people from organizations such as PwC, Diageo, EasyJet, UBS, Barclays. And from that group, we created a steering committee who helped us draft the document, along with a load of large Magic Circle law firms and some big law firms in Australia too. So the result of that process was the creation of oneNDA. So there's a single standardized NDA. The idea is that none of the main body of the text is negotiable. All you can negotiate is the variable sections at the top. So purpose, duration, governing law, and jurisdiction. The idea is just to make it as straightforward as possible to use, negotiate, and for business users to use as well. So in terms of where we're at with oneNDA, we've had over 10,000 organizations download the document. We've got over 600 organizations who have adopted it, including PwC UK, including Diageo, including some of the organizations that I just mentioned. We're live in 80 countries, and we're currently undergoing a translation campaign to get that usage increased in places like Brazil and France. And we're available on over 20 technology platforms. So after the success of oneNDA, it really was kind of a runaway success, and it wasn't something that we'd necessarily intended to do, but it kind of took on a life of its own. So we decided to ask the community what they wanted to see standardized next. So these are just a few of the responses that you can see here to that question we put out to people. So basically everyone said they wanted the DPA to be standardized. So why DPAs? I think we all know why, but there's a legal requirement that you have a DPA in place, well, under the GDPR at least, and the CCPA, you need a data processing agreement in place where you're sharing personal data between two parties. The content is always the same, more or less. It's driven by legislation, and therefore it's largely the same whenever you enter into one. And DPAs aren't just a European issue. So we've obviously got the CCPA in California. There are other federal privacy laws is in the offing, but you've also got lots of state privacy laws which are coming through. And you also have, there's an increasing proliferation of data processing, data privacy legislation. And I think there's one upcoming in China too. So the benefits of oneDPA, time and cost savings, very similar to oneDPA. Risk reduction. So if you've got a standard that everyone agrees to and everyone agrees that it's regulatorily sound, then you're reducing your risk. And this document is always going to take into account regulatory changes. So I know we've had a couple of questions about that too, so we can cover that later. So in terms of the process, oneNDA was an incredibly manual process. It was very fun, but as I mentioned earlier, we had a steering committee of organizations who were on board at the start to help draft and help decide what should go in and out of the agreement. But we also relied heavily on the broader community, and we would send the document out to the community of 1,200 other lawyers who contributed to the document, and we'd go back and forth, and a lot of this was conducted via email. So this whole process took about 6 months to create the document. With oneDPA, we wanted to take a different approach, and we really wanted to leverage technology as much as possible. And that's why we collaborated with PwC and ContractPod on this project, because it was really about technology first and really harnessing the power of technology to enhance the standardization agenda and really push that forward. So we actually delivered this project entirely using our platform called ClauseStack. And the whole process took 8 weeks rather than 6 months. It was all delivered using various rooms within the platform where people could vote on what they wanted in and out. And it was all very virtual, and we could push out notifications to people in real time. So it was a much smoother process. And not only was the process digitized, but as was the output and the delivery, which Jerry is gonna come on to. Jerry, I don't know if your hand is raised for this bit now.
It is. I just wanted to ask, hi, everybody. If you do have questions, there should be a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. So we would love to answer your questions, but if you could place them there, that would be very much appreciated, and we will answer them either live or in that chat, in that Q&A discussion. I'm so sorry for interrupting, Roisin.
Oh, that is absolutely fine, Jerry. That was a very valid interruption, valid and important interruption. That is actually not sarcastic, although it sounds slightly. So yeah, it was a much quicker process, and the delivery of it, Jerry's going to come on to, was also tech enabled, and it looks fantastic. So I'm really excited to see that when Jerry talks about that. So as I mentioned, this was delivered via Clause. So this is where our community now lives. So our oneNDA community, we migrated over to ClauseStack. It's really just a stream process for standardizing documents. It's quicker to enable people to collaborate and collect feedback. And there's an audit trail for easy reference as to why certain decisions were made on including certain things and excluding certain things. On ClauseStack, we also have other standards that are available. So we're not the only standardization organization, if you like. So there's bond terms and common paper available on that on our platform. And we were just to make sure that any document that we created out of this process was compatible with those standards too, because we're all aiming to achieve the same objective, which is just make everyone's life easier. So over the 6 months since we've launched oneDPA, we've had 1,300 downloads, and we're available in 76 countries, or downloaded in 76 countries. We expect this to increase as time goes on, as more people put DPA through their approvals process. We saw the same with oneNDA. It sometimes takes quite a lot of time with large organizations to get this through. So we're continuing to see downloads on a regular basis. So it's been great, and we'd love to hear from you as to what you'd like to see next. And as Joe says, any questions that you have about the process or the document, please just pop them in the chat. And I will now hand over to Barry.
Who, as usual, is on mute when he shouldn't be. Hi, I'm Barry Proudfoot. I'm the lead data privacy lawyer in Diageo, the drinks company. If you don't know who Diageo are, think Guinness. We do lots of other stuff, but think Guinness. Okay, so why were we involved in the oneDPA initiative? Well, we've been involved with TAB on the earlier standardization exercise, oneDA, that Roisin has been talking about. And we were invited to participate in the oneDPA exercise on April the 20th. I think I just got back from holiday and I was thinking, what is this all about? Because I hadn't been involved in the previous part. So the question was, should we agree to join? And you have yes. Somebody sneaked in an exclamation mark there. That's not my style, but it was a definite yes, to be honest. I mean, it's a no-brainer, because we could see that the principle of standardization did make sense, made a lot of sense. So, okay, this is supposed to move the screen forward, and it's not. Can somebody move the screen forward for me, please? Why we came on board, there we are. So good common sense. And it cut down on the work needed by data privacy practitioners. Lord knows there's not many of us around. And so, you know, we can concentrate on the bigger things rather than tiddling around on the fine detail of, you know, say who has access when documents get handed back, who pays for what, and so on and so forth. And, you know, the knock-on effect of getting us to concentrate on the key work rather than the basically bog standard type work helps save costs as well. Now, okay, so how would that be achievable? The new document, I felt, and I think that other people in the group also felt, that it would have to be balanced. So the rights and duties of one party weren't overwhelmed by the rights of the other, because you do end up with a situation sometimes where one party has I don't know, greater economic heft or something like that, imposing very tough terms on the other party, and it just ends up being imbalanced. And if you had a document like that that was more in favour of the vendor than the purchaser or something like that, then people wouldn't use it. They wouldn't fall back on it as a standardization type document. And as I've said there, the whole objective would be missed. So we also took into account that the existence of the document, knowledge of the existence of the document might take a little bit of time to get about. And it will take longer to be adopted, but that's fine. That's how these things work. So, okay. So I've had their time and tide, wait for no person. The existence of the document might take a little time to get about. Acceptance and use would take a little possibly longer. But when I was scratching my head thinking about this, well, you know, why did we go along with this? Well, think back to the IAPP when they started off in 2000. They were a small New Hampshire not-for-profit organisation. And look at them now, 22 years later. They are the people who set the standards for qualifications. You know, if you want to go for a job, you will be saying, I'm CIPPE or whatever, CIPP US or Asia. And people will buy the label, they will get it, they will understand what it is that they're getting here. And that's what I was thinking of when we decided to get involved in this, that, you know, it will start off small, but it will get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you will reach a critical mass. Okay. Okay, so what did we do? We joined the steerco, participated in the meetings, obviously, participated in the documentation, in updating the documentation and so on. My main query was, and I think this is one of the questions that comes up later on, how would it be kept up to date? Because my concern was that we create a nice, bright, shiny document that would be fantastic for, I don't know, September 2022, but by the time we got to September 2023 or 24, it will be out of date. And we know that the situation is very, very dynamic. This is a very young area of law, and, you know, regulators are filling in gaps in their legislation. The courts are starting to produce judgments and so on. So it's changing, and of course, countries are creating a new legislation anyway. So it's changing all the time. So it did need to be kept up to date. And I think it was in May, possibly June, that PwC held their hand up and said that they would do it, for which I have to admit I'm very, very grateful. Okay, so the next point. So what are we doing with it? So standardization is possible, but I have to hold my hand up and say it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all exercise. My view is that the document that we have here is well balanced, works brilliantly for low and medium risk areas. Very high risk areas, we might want to go more bespoke, but they come through high days and holidays, to be honest. So are we going to roll it out? Yes, we are. We're going to roll it out in the early part of the new year with our higher risk template as well. What I think we'll do is we'll draw on what we did for NDA to get the document out to the business and to other businesses. So for internally, what we're going to do is have a visual guide to show how the process works within my company, within Diageo. And we're going to create FAQs as well, because we can get those out of the way. If we're really clever, we'll use a chatbot, but that's up for debate at the moment. And reaching out to other people, to the people that we're negotiating with, we'll be sending an explanatory note to send to the recipient as well. So that's what we have in mind, and that's how we're likely to take this forward. Okay, thank you.
So I think that's me. Thank you, Barry.
Did you?
It is me. Hopefully I should at this point be better at advancing my own slides, but if I get stuck or I forget how to do this, I hope you will forgive me. Oh, it says I'm controlling the screen. This is great. I have control of something for the first time ever. So what we did at ContractPodAi, and again, thank you all for joining today, is we were in discussions with TLB, PwC, and the entire group of folks involved with Clause Stack and the oneDPA project. We said, what is the future of how we are going to be doing this? And a big part of this is bringing automation. Now, you see 4 things on your screen right now: standardization, legal design, legal technology. All of these fit together. If you're not familiar with probably the least familiar thing on this page is legal design. Now, Roisin and TLB are big believers in it. I'm a big believer in it as well. And legal design, in a sense, is really how do you communicate? It's not just the way a document looks, but it's also process design, service design. How do you interact with folks within and without the law, within and without the practice of law? And how do we deliver better services? And a big portion of that has come to be standardization, which is, of course, getting one or a set of globally agreed upon terms that can be reused and that folks can accept easily, as well as making it so that there's less work involved in delivering that. And I want to be clear, I don't mean less legal work or legal thinking. I mean less steps, less back and forth. But putting those all together, we end up with what we're calling here modern contracting, which is ease of use, ease of understanding, delivery via technology, but also integration with with the fact that we're humans. There's a lot of humans on this call. I think there's only one robot and it's recording the call. So I think that's important to understand. So here at ContractPodAi, and let's see if I did it, we want to talk a little bit about the benefits of automation. Now, personally, I've been working in automation for AI and automation companies for a long time. And there's a tremendous amount of benefits to automating routine, boring tasks that computers are really good at, but humans get bored. I mean, in fact, yesterday we started talking about George Jetson, which if you've seen the Jetsons, he was born in 2022. In 30 years, he's going to be pushing a button to make widgets for Spacely Sprockets. But we're not quite there yet. But the benefits today are increased collaboration, whether you can work better with people and other law departments, other lawyers through use of these tools, improving review time, another benefit of automation and standardization. If you've got one document that at least we've agreed on 90% of what's in there, or even 95, or even all of it, you're going to be able to do your job a lot better, a lot faster, and move on to, and you're going to find out that moving on to the teams that have not adopted those, you're going to want to push and really talk about the benefits for those folks as well. You can figure out what's important quicker. So viewing the highlights, you know, if I go to Graham today or Barry and say, here's my oneDPA, and Graham looks at it or Barry looks at it or Roisin looks at it and says, well, you know what, we agree with everything, but we see you want notice in 24 hours and our standard is 72 hours. It's much faster to do that than for you to read through 60 pages of data processing agreements for one change. So we're really excited about that with oneDPA generally. And finally, one thing that we're finding, and this is something that we're really excited about, is that this entire process improves adherence to the rules. Because instead of having to dig through things or look through multiple pages to find out what you're supposed to do in the event, in the unpleasant event of a data breach or what you're supposed to do when you're adding on a new vendor, you could see it very quickly. And that's a really key part of oneDPA that we found was really impressive. Now, I will jump to the next slide, and I do see there's a question. Now, I think there's a video that plays here in the background. You can also jump right to the creator that we built here at ContractPodAi that you're seeing on the screen. We've tried to make it as simple and easy to use as possible. However, if you're not an attorney or you're not familiar with this, I would still make sure after you're done producing it that you check with your lawyer. I do have to say that, as I'm sure all the lawyers on here are yes, thank you for making sure that you tell people to check with us. But it's really important because there are some complexities in here. We've tried very hard to add all these key features and all these key ideas, but to walk you through it. We've even made it into a way that there's an advanced mode and a simple mode where you can fill out everything in our generator that we built, or you can fill out the basics and go fix them later. We've made sure that they show up as clearly as possible by highlighting anything that needs to be changed once you're done. So, you know, with that, we're really happy to have released this to the public. We're really happy that folks are using it. And what's nice is this, we're going to, I'm sure this question is going to come up and Roisin will talk about it as well. We really do and keep this up to date alongside of TLB and the other folks involved to make sure that as new changes come out, you'll be able to come here and generate a new oneDPA for your needs. And by the way, what you're seeing here, I know it's probably a little small, but there were actually over 200 different outcomes that you can make with this oneDPA generator. So imagine doing that by hand. And again, that sounds like a lot, but we're talking, the choices are things like 24 hours or 72 hours. So while we say 200 different outcomes, you get one document that you know is going to look the same, and the points that you get are always going to be the same. I think this is still me. I hope it's still me. But if it's, you know, I saw Graham about to laugh as I said that, but one thing that we find and that we know is automation is a huge, huge benefit. As you can see right now, Gartner says 89% increase, 89% of corporate counsel who adopt automation confirm that these meet or exceed their expected ROI. We're hearing this more and more. Automation really is a benefit. And even if you're just at the basics of document automation or finding out where your contracts are or any sort of core automation, it's the first step, and you'll definitely see you'll definitely find through these processes, as you adopt them, they really do begin helping you improve your ROI, improve your turnaround, and understand more about what's going on. So I will open it up. I see that we've got a couple questions, and we do have some questions that were submitted beforehand. Graham, Roisin, I turn it back to you.
I think, Jerry, I'll talk through some of the questions that we received through first, but just to mention as well that we've done both on ContractPod side on the oneDPA generator. There is a the microsite which kind of Jerry talked about. There is a lot of kind of useful information to make a start on that standardization plus CLM. And I think it's really important to also mention that look, this is free. Free access to the this oneDPA generator, as well as to clause stack as well. And TLB have done also immense amount of work creating a really good video as well that was done by Katie Moon at TLB, talking through the oneDPA project, how to use the oneDPA, and there's really lots of useful free tips around anything from a playbook to actually how to interpret the oneDPA, how to use the oneDPA. So and the main reason, of course, that for PwC UK and Diageo and ContractPod, we all adopted the oneNDA and rolled this out. So this was always a very passionate project of ours, and but I think the main thing I would say here is that the reason we've all done, and the legal industry, and a special thanks to them for everyone that's contributed to the oneDPA project, we've all come together to try and streamline, automate, and cut out unnecessary negotiations. And this is all coming to the market, free, specifically, obviously, from TLB and ContractPod side. So, so I think it's really useful to go and kind of check those areas out. We're going to be issuing the recording post this as well, so you can kind of show this to your internal colleagues. I'm sure TLB, ContractPod, and Diageo, we're all happy to answer any questions that you might have specific to your organization. We will also be publishing out a white paper, so for those people that have signed up to this webinar, you'll get early access to that white paper, and it will be more widely published as well. And then another thing to mention as well, that we will be at Legal Geek, I believe 28th of September. Katie Moon will be sharing the stage with Matt Gould, GC at ContractPod, where we'll be talking about oneNDA and oneDPA as well. So we had a few questions coming in, so we'll start those and start this discussion with the panel. So we received a number of questions, and we're going to split into two themes here. So one is looking at where there are kind of potential objections from third parties when trying to use the oneDPA. So to the panel, so the first question is, how do you handle objections from customer procurement teams that insist on using their NDA DPA because it's their policy?
I can start with that one. I think you just need to point to the names who are involved in this creation, and the fact is that both of these documents are owned by the community. They're not owned by any one organization. They have the seal of approval of all these different organizations plus a number of law firms. So why would you insist on using your own? I think I'd just chuck the question straight back at them. I think some people have reservations about standardization generally. I think that people feel that it might take away some from their role, but I think we can all appreciate on this call, like everyone who's attended today can appreciate that sinking feeling when you get a document that you expect is just going to be a standard DPA or a standard NDA, and it's not, and then you spend hours trying to hack it back into a state that you think is acceptable. That doesn't add any value to anybody. It's just a waste of everyone's time, and everyone's time on this call is worth more than that. So that was a bit of a long-winded answer, but I would just point to the people who are involved.
And as a software GC, as a SaaS GC, I will say we're actually, and obviously I'm proud of this, what we have done is not only is there a set of guidance on clausestack.com and ideas on how to talk with your counterparty about why to use this, but one of the things that we've done is we put that guidance and given explainers directly into our contracting documents to try to convince folks to understand more about what's going on with these projects. I do think Roisin's right, and of course, being from ContractPodAi, I hear this a lot: is this going to take away from my job? Is this going to? And really, there's a few things I think we could say there. First of all, if your job is reviewing standard contractual clauses over and over, I think you're probably unhappy right now in the first place. So what we want to do is get you away from thinking about those things and focusing on the core issues in the DPA. The other thing to keep in mind is at this point, with formal documents that have been issued, whether it's the UK's IDT agreements or the standard contractual clauses, you're attaching a lot of the same paper anyway. So really, at this point, a big portion of this is saying, instead of staggering and shoving the key items throughout the document, we put them all at the front. So you know exactly what to look for. It's much easier to read. Are there, and I do want to say, are there companies that have come back and said, no, you have to use ours, we don't do that? From my perspective, you know, it's difficult, especially if you're a SaaS company, because as you know, or regardless of who you are, but especially if you're providing one standardized platform or service, you of course have everybody on the same system. You have everybody having the same security terms. So I think one thing that you can do, and one thing that I've expressed in other panels, is to point out that everybody gets the same level of service. Everybody's having the same data protection, and you're going to have to align all of these terms anyway. But I mean, ultimately, yes. Are you going to have those customers or counterparties who simply say no? Absolutely. I still invite them to check it out, to learn more about the project. But I will say, you know, we have had significant success. I think we're you know, it's growing since over the past few months, but we have only had maybe one or two recently that have come back saying you must absolutely use our DPA. And, you know, it's just an exercise in, I say this as Chief Evangelist for ContractPodAi, it's an exercise in evangelizing and talking about the benefits of using this sort of thing. And Roisin, I don't know if we want to get into it, but there are a few other standardization projects out there. And you, Roisin, feel free to cut me off if you, but one of the things we're all working.
Okay.
One of the things that we are doing is, between these other standardization projects and oneDPA and oneNDA, is all of these are actually being discussed on ClauseStack as well as in their own private communities. But there's a big push to make sure that these other projects all interoperate. So if you use oneDPA and someone sends you, I don't know, bond terms DPA, it's not released yet, but at one point it will be out there, you can feel comfortable that they're compatible. Or if you're using one paper, you know, if you're using bond terms and you want to use oneDPA, they're compatible. So there's a lot, even though we're called, for all these projects, one of the core goals is really to increase standardization generally and increase interoperability, so that we know when you're getting this, that you know you can trust and rely on what you're seeing will work across the board. So sorry for that very long-winded answer, but my job is talking.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's right. Do you mind if I go, Graham? Okay.
No, absolutely, Barry.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, if you're trying to persuade people inside the business, as Roisin and Jerry have said, you know, largely it's the same law. You know, you're going to end up on a data controller, data processor agreement. You're always going to have to run up against Article 28. You know what the terms are there. If you have to do exporting information to India or the States or whatever, you know you're going to have to end up with the standard contractual clauses. Or if you're in Britain, you know, the IDTA or whatever you choose to use. There is a limited amount of variations which can be carried out, particularly on the SCCs and so on. But as I think it was Roisin was saying, this version is clearer, it's cleaner, and it's less likely to face resistance while still protecting your own equities. So, you know, it's a win-win situation, really. And if nothing else, procurement should be happy that, you know, they get the contract signed. In theory, anyway, they get the contract signed quicker with less argy-bargy. Sorry, Graham.
Thanks, Barry. Roisin, was there anything you wanted to add to those particular points?
No, although I want to ask a question of the audience if people feel comfortable sharing. I'm really keen to hear if anybody has any reservations about standardization, or if people are sort of on the journey to adopt this, or just generally people's thoughts other than questions. If anybody wants to add or feels like sharing anything, that'd be really interesting to hear. Sorry, Graham.
Thanks, Roisin. And I think while some people just had some points on that specific area, I think there's also one thing that we really in PwC UK, is when we're adopting the oneNDA, just taking that use case as well as part of this rollout, is that if you're getting pushback from from third parties, what we saw, and kind of like oneNDA is, I guess Roisin, is a year old now, is it? Is it just over a year old? So
yeah.
So if we look at that, then I think it currently there are around 650 that are formally kind of adopted and communicated, or just over 650. But 2,600 organisations, or over 2,600 organisations, are actually using that now. And certainly from our experience and taking that use case for hopefully in a year's time, when we're looking at oneDPA, we're looking to see more and more kind of adopters coming in. We certainly, from our use case of looking at oneNDA, we're not seeing kind of those pushbacks. And actually, what we found really helpful, and again, going back, have a look on what's on ClawStat, because there are very helpful tools around introducing what this standardized module is. Because actually, once we kind of talk through to say, look, this is the work that we've done. And I think one of the strongest arguments for me was that when originally we kind of started to look at this, there were a lot of kind of Silver Circle, Magic Circle law firms, plus leading in-house departments that were looking at this. And one of the strongest benefits is really, this is not just one lawyer having a specific view, it's actually the industry contributing, voting on clauses, going to workshops, and actually spending all of that time, all of that coming kind of free of charge. And that's for me anyway, one of the strongest benefits for why people should be using that as well. So that's why we encourage that if you do get kind of those pushbacks, that you actually kind of, you encourage them to go and have a look at the resources that's available to them, but that being one of the strongest use cases. I don't know if we received any questions on the point that Roisin raised yet. I couldn't see any, but let me know.
Graham, I was actually going to say, I just realized this. If you actually go to our website and you go to the legal page, you can read the explainer that I wrote for our customers to understand more about oneDPA and standardization. So if you are looking for something to steal or use as a source, as an idea of how to communicate this, feel free to just steal what I've written. It's I don't mind, make it your own, or just keep, you can always reference ContractPodAi in your own contract if you want, but feel free to go ahead and take a look at that, because I do think it does help get our customers or counterparties and others understand some of these, why these are so important and how to do this.
Thanks, Jerry. Much appreciated. I don't know. Have we received any questions in? I've not seen any yet.
Yeah, there's a couple for Barry. So I don't know if you can see these, Graham, but they're in the Q&A. So one, do you expect resistance from other enterprises who expect to use their form, or do you already use your own form in the majority of DPA cases? I think we've actually more or less covered that, but I don't know if you answer that, Barry. So do you?
No, I think we've covered that, haven't we? I think you're right, Roisin.
Okay, cool. So there's the next one, which is, please can Diageo explain why they feel the need to use their high risk DPA and why? Is it the use of indemnities, for example?
It depends what. Yes, I suppose it will be that if you're going to pick anything out, but it's going to depend on the actual nature of the high risk, isn't it? It depends on how much extra you feel you need to add in. It depends very much on the sets of circumstances. So when I say this is what we're likely to do, you know, we just have to wait and see what comes through the door. But yes, I don't know who asked the question, but I think they're spot on. You know, liabilities obviously is always a biggie there, isn't it? Really, it's always up there for argument. Were there any other questions?
There are a couple of, I don't know if you can see these, Graham. I don't know if it'd be, can you see those on the Q&A?
No,
oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. I just don't want to be assuming your role. Just had a couple of interesting comments, really. So a barrier to adoption for me and my company is I work in healthcare, so I'd need to convince my GC that this would be better than our standard approach. Currently, I have standard HIPAA language in our NDA. That is a tricky one, but I'd be interested to hear, and this is something we can take offline, whoever that is, how that HIPAA language is received. Is that generally accepted within that industry? That'd be quite interesting.
Roisin, can I just jump on that very quickly?
Please do. Yeah, please do.
I think first of all, HIPAA, and this is not yet a HIPAA business associate agreement. You know, while I would love to say that while I think we'd all love to say that it covers every single data processing potential in the world, there are still areas where it's a work in progress, as Roisin and Graham said earlier. So to the extent that you need a BAA and a HIPAA document, and you need a BAA and a DPA, you know, that is something that I believe we've already discussed, Roisin. And again, please keep me honest. This is something where we've been discussing for future versions of the data of the oneDPA. But you know, again, you then also you have standard HIPAA language in your NDA. So with oneNDA, there are some rules on how you use it. I do believe there's an additional term section, or there's a block where you can add some additional language into the oneNDA as well for specific cases. But this is something that I know TLB is consistently working on with the advisory board. But keep in mind, you know, we're talking. One thing that the goal was to solve for 80% to 90% of cases. Something like high risk, you know, we're transferring national IDs, voter identification data. That's going to need a little more. That's going to have specific additional things you need to add in. And while the oneDPA does cover them, and of course Article 28 requirements and GDPR covers that, you do have to list them. I do think that the goal is to get out of those 80 to 90% of cases where it's a DPA. If you need a BAA, because I'm assuming you're a US company, you're still going to need a BAA. If you're going to need to require specific HIPAA language in a non-disclosure agreement, you're going to still need to have that specific language in your NDA, but you can add it in. The goal is to keep the general terms the same, but specific things are called out and are blocked out and are effectively highlighted in the document to make that easier. Roisin, is there anything we should add there? I'm not sure. I don't want to steal too much of your thunder.
Oh, no, not at all. I think, just as you said, I think we'll look to add more modules in the future, but like, feel free to email me if you want to talk more about that, because I think that's quite an interesting question. I'd be curious about how that plays out in practice. There's a question here from Simon. Hi, Simon. Standardization is the way forward. The more that those who generally work on their own force, so larger enterprises and software companies, to name two, can take the lead, then we will get there faster. Yeah, I completely agree. And anybody on this call who's from a large organization like Diageo, PwC UK, well, actually everybody, please, you know, you adopt it, but those large organizations are definitely sort of wave makers when it comes to adopting standards. There's another question here. How is this used in the States? I have not yet received a request on NDA. So that's an interesting question. Obviously, this was an initiative that was born out of the UK, and it had involvement from people in Australia and Europe, but it also had some involvement from the US, including individuals Google in the US. We've also had some big name adopters. I mean, obviously ContractPod is in the US. We have had some big name adopters in the US, like Aspen Aerogels was a recent one. But Jerry, you may have some more info on this as well, being States yourself.
Yeah, so we officially we are a British company, Roisin. We are based in Paddington. We are based in London and New York City. We are seeing it. I am using it. Again, we're getting more adoption and we're getting a lot of, oh, what is this? For folks who are asking about oneNDA, oneDPA is actually a little easier to explain sometimes than oneNDA. But honestly, I am seeing generally it goes through without changes. With financial services companies, sometimes they follow a playbook and they need to see very specific language. Hedge funds, investment funds, there's some playbook that circles around the world that every one of these hedge funds, debt funds, and investment funds uses, and it's always the same 3 clauses that they add to the oneNDA. And actually, I have to email Roisin and Electra. Maybe we want to add that as a hedge fund guidance set. But I think you'll start seeing more of it. And if you haven't seen, I did mention a couple other standardization projects that are out there. They are coming up. I've seen a few folks use the common paper NDA and the bond terms NDA, but it's really been, for us, it's been, this is great. We'd love to adopt this. And, so I think you'll start seeing more of it. But I can't tell you exactly how many people are using it, just that we're having about 60 to 70%, and we send out about between 5 and 10 NDAs a day. So out of those 5 and 10 NDAs we send out, we get about 60 to 6 or 7 a day back that are just signed without changes. Out of that, again, 1 to 2 come back with changes, and 1 to 2 of them come back with, please use our NDA. We're not allowed to make any changes or do anything else.
Jerry, I should say that there's also a oneNDA M&A document available on Clause Stack 2 that might account for the hedge fund changes, which I know there's a question for Aziz on that too. So if you maybe have a look at that and see what you think, Aziz. There's a question here from Peter. The benefits are really clear for in-house, so Diageo, for example, but are you seeing takeover adoption of external standardization initiatives in forms prepared by law firms? So I think that question is whether law firms have adopted oneNDA, but let me know if I've misunderstood that, or oneDPA. I know from my experience that certain law firms are using it, particularly those that were involved in the initiative. So for example, I know that Linklaters uses it, but I don't actually know of all the other law firms out there. I think that's the question. I don't know if anybody else has any experience of that. I don't know if you've been had any conversation with your panel, or same for you, Graham.
So I think there are a few, I think, that have adopted the listing on the oneNDA site. So I think to a degree they've looked at that, and I think there are some that have kind of adopted it as one of their templates, as part of that piece that I've seen. I think what we've seen, going back to the US point, is we've seen US organizations signing up to oneNDA, as part of kind of the work that we do with them. So I think that's one piece that we've got our experience in, that we're not seeing really too much pushback on that. I think what we will recommend is that if you're just waiting to kind of receive a oneNDA to decide what to do with that, I think as part of kind of the wider adoption piece, looking to kind of if you can look to adopt, and at least as one of the templates, I think it will be really helpful. I think the question from Oliver just around the oneNDA, whether that's still valid if amended. Now, Roisin, my understanding is that with it being the oneNDA, the idea being that one of the main benefits is it is not negotiable apart from the optional additional piece of information on oneDPA that's in there. So do you want to just kind of talk on that just for Oliver's question?
Yeah, so with oneNDA and oneDPA, we ask that if you do want to amend it, you can use the language, that's absolutely fine. But if you do amend it, then you can't call it oneNDA or oneDPA anymore. So the branding, the assets would need to be removed. So obviously it is still a valid agreement. It's just not what we would call oneNDA. And actually the way that the documents are structured is such that you actually can't amend the back end of the language. It's sort of locked. So no, ideally not, but it is still valid technically, yes.
Yeah, and Roisin, I just answered as well in the Q&A, and I said basically the same thing in case people could not see it. It was, we remove all the branding, we remove all the identifiers, but typically, and I am answering Aziz's question as well with a link to the M&A document, as well as some of the same numbers we see. Again, you know, we just remove the branding and we say, fine, since we made amendments, these are not objectionable, even though they may not make a lot of sense or they may not be necessary. And I would say one thing to keep in mind is some of these changes we understand are industry specific. We'll just remove the branding. We just say, fine, no longer the oneNDA because we made changes. I also do that because, of course, in our CLM, once we remove the branding and mark it as modified inside ContractPod, I can run reports inside the platform and say, okay, these were the number of NDAs that were modified. These are pure oneNDA. These are modified oneNDAs, and these are third party or other NDAs that have been submitted. But I think Roisin gave the best practice and the requirement, which is to remove the branding.
Thank you. Thanks, Jerry. Thanks, Roisin. So I don't think we've answered this question. Have governmental organisations entered into the oneDPA without red lines? If yes, which governmental organisations? So
I don't know is the short answer, but the ICO did provide comments on oneNDAs, oneDPA. So the ICO in the UK did provide comments on it, which we incorporated. So, but I don't know to the extent that it's being used by governmental organisations, unfortunately. Sorry.
Jerry, have you experienced, or Barry, if you come across any examples so far?
Not from my point of view, no. Sorry.
I would say we've had a few government organizations that unfortunately I can't disclose, but they've tried out the generator. So we clearly see, I could tell that there is interest, but I think we are still, you know, eventually we will get there. I'm sure that at some point you'll start seeing lists of pre-approved or certified data processing agreements. That will, am I doing that? I'm sorry. Oh no, sorry, the screen color changing. But I know that we are seeing an interest in it. I think it's going to be, you know, for any government organization, it's always a long process, but we've had 3 or 4 high level information commission officers or data protection offices have come through and run and generated to see what it looks like. So I think it's a future, I think that's going to be a future use case or a future outcome for this.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Jerry. So I think we touched on this before around kind of keeping the oneDPA maintained and current, you know, especially with certain regulatory changes coming up, and obviously as we develop the kind of, you know, the rollout of the adoption of oneDPA. So Roisin, do you want to maybe just touch on how that may be kept up to date?
Yeah, so as a general rule, we're trying not to update these documents frequently, because obviously it's a big lift for people to actually roll them out within their organization. So to the extent we cannot update them, we won't. We'll review them annually, and obviously we'll also review them more regularly than that, to the extent there's a new regulatory change or a legal change we need to take account of. And we'll update the document in line with support from PwC and the rest of the steering committee and anyone else in the community, and then we'll push that live again. But as I say, we'll try and keep that to a minimum unless we absolutely have to, and keep to a regular schedule so that people know when it is they need to be looking out for updates.
Oh, sorry, Graham.
No, I was just going to say, it was to your point, Jerry, I think you mentioned before, is that if there are updates to the oneDPA in line with kind of regulatory changes, I think, that's we'll update the oneDPA generator just to kind of tie in with those updates as well, I assume, but let me know if that's not the case, Jerry.
No, we plan to keep that up to date, and we are working on a few other generators going forward. This was, like I said, it was a lot of work coming up, automating and making over 200 possible outcomes work. Roisin and Graham, I'm sure you remember the nights I was emailing, and I feel badly. I was sending emails at like 10:30, 11 midnight my time, and I think I got an email back from Roisin that said, shouldn't you be sleeping? I'm waking up. But it is something that we're going to keep up to date now that it is, and we look forward to whatever comes next. I did see a question, and maybe this is more for Roisin. Paul Vince asked about a plain English employee stock option agreement, but I'm wondering if there's a way for folks to submit proposed standardization ideas to ClauseStack so that can go on. I know that we talked about some of the submitted ideas earlier.
Yeah, thank you for that beautiful setup there, Jerry. But I did see your comment, Paul, and I think that that's a brilliant idea, because I've seen one of these. I've had to sign one of those before, and it is like, it's, even for a lawyer, it's quite difficult to follow. So I think that would be an amazing idea. And we do have an area on ClauseStack where you can submit proposals for standardization projects, and if they get a certain level of interest from the community, then we'll consider running it. But I think it would be a brilliant idea, and I would love to actually have a chat about that at some point too.
Thanks, Roisin. Thanks, Jerry. Any other questions? We're nearly at time. I think we already talked through the final, which was on the HIPAA language in the NDA. So I think we've kind of talked that through, but let us know if you have any further questions on that specific question. So thank you for everyone for joining today, much appreciated. As I said, we'll be issuing out the white paper on oneDPA. Also, there are also lots of hints and tips on ClauseStack and how to use oneDPA. So do make sure you go and visit that as well. Visit the oneDPA generator. And for those that are going to be a legal geek, both PwC, Roisin, and ContractPod will be there as well. So if you've got any questions around using oneDPA, then we're more than happy to answer that. If there are any additional questions outside of that, do feel free to reach out to any of us. We're more than happy to talk you through the oneNDA adoption journey, oneDPA questions, anything that you may have, and more than happy to spend some time around that. But in the meantime, thank you everyone for your time. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you everyone for joining.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.